When we read about the Kushanas, it is the Kushan Emperor Kanishka that figures prominently in our history books. And there is this impression which we get while reading these books that Kanishka was a great patron of Buddhism. And we are told that he convened the Fourth Buddhist Council in Kashmir, and there are other stories that associate Kanishka with Buddhism. So in this video, we will look at whether these stories or whether these claims about Kanishka association with Buddhism are true or not. And we will start our discussion with the coins and inscriptions of Kanishka. So if we look at the coins of Kanishka, we find that the most common coins of Kanishka depicts Kanishka as sacrificing over a small fire altar. The fact that these are the most common depiction of Kanishka suggests that Kanishka wanted to portray himself as a follower of Zoroastrianism. Now, if we look at the coins of Kanishka in which Lord Buddha is depicted, we find that there are some coins. And these were probably the first physical representation of Lord Buddha that was ever produced. And Kanishka was the only Kushan emperor who issued coins in which Buddha Shakyamuni and Bodhisattva Maitreyi are depicted. When we particularly look at the gold coins, one puzzling aspect about these coins is that these gold coins are extremely rare. We have found only 5 such coins of Kanishka in which Lord Buddha is depicted. So the fact that these coins are extremely rare and their condition is near perfect has led some scholars to argue that these coins were most likely issued for commemorative purposes or for ceremonial purposes. These were not issued for general circulation. So whatever the case may be, the fact that these coins are extremely rare may probably suggest that if we are using coins as evidence, one thing which we can say is that Kanishka was not a great patron of Buddhism. The story is somewhat similar if we take the example of inscriptional evidence. The famous inscription of Kanishka, which is the Rabatak inscription, here we find that there is no mention of Lord Buddha. Instead, Kanishka only mentions Iranian god and goddesses. So by using the inscriptional evidence also, we can say that Kanishka was not a great patron of Buddhism. Now, if we look at the claim that Kanishka convened the Fourth Buddhist Council in Kashmir, we find that the most detailed information about this event comes from a later source, particularly the Chinese traveler Xianzhang. He tells us that Kanishka, the king of Gandhar, convened a great Buddhist council in Kashmir 400 years after the death of Buddha. He tells us that Kanishka was disturbed by the conflicting doctrine of different sects, so he gathered monks from every sect in Kashmir to resolve these conflicts. Now, there are some scholars who question the historical value of this story. The reason being is that the oldest source that talks about a Buddhist council in Kashmir is a text which is a biography of Vasubandhu. And this biography was written by the great Buddhist saint Parmarth. And in this biography, Parmarth talks about the council that was convened in Kashmir. And he also mentions that there was a king who authorized this council. Now, here, Parmarth does not mention the name of this king. So, there are no evidence for us to say conclusively that it was Kanishka who convened this council, this Buddhist council in Kashmir. This is also true about other great Buddhist personality. So we are told that Kanishka had relations with Vasumitra, Ashwaghosh, etc. And what we find here is that there is not enough evidence for us to say that Kanishka was associated with these great personalities of Buddhism. Now, one question which you might have is that if there is not enough evidence to say that Kanishka was a great patron of Buddhism, then why there is this widely held belief that Kanishka greatly favored Buddhism? The answer to this is that it was in the Chinese sources we find that Kanishka is associated with Buddhism. Chinese sources describe Kanishka as second Ashok. So it was because of these Chinese sources there is this impression that that Kanishka was a great patron of Buddhism. Now, if we look at the Pali Canon, interestingly, we find that here Kanishka is nowhere mentioned. Now, you can say that since Pali Canon belonged to the Theravadic tradition and Kanishka was associated with the Mahayana tradition, that is why Pali Canon does not mention Kanishka. And this is a valid argument. But can we say that Kanishka did not have any connection with Buddhism? The answer to this is no, because first of all, the policy of the Kushanas as a whole was that all of the religions that were present in the Kushan realm were equally favored. So if we take the example of Buddhism, we find that it was in the Kushan period that great sculptures of Buddha were built, and there are also evidence that suggest that a famous stupa was built during the time of Kanishka. I am here talking about the famous stupa that was built at the outskirts of Peshawar. This was the stupa that Xuanzang talks about, and between 1908 to 1910 an excavation was carried out here, and in this excavation archaeologists recovered a reliquary casket. In this reliquary casket you can see that below the Buddha there is a king who is depicted, and most scholars argue that this king was none other than Kanishka. So the picture which we get is a complicated one. On the one hand, we cannot say that Kanishka did not have any relation with Buddhism, and on the other hand, we can also not say that Kanishka had the same relation with Buddhism as Ashok had. So in other words, we cannot say that Kanishka was the second Ashok. And in my view, Kanishka favored Buddhism as he favored other religions that were present in the Kushan realm. Now, if you want to know more about the Kushanas, do watch this playlist. Thank you for watching.